everyone. So today we're going to be making a fairly quick quilt. I think it'll be fairly quick for Valentine's Day. So there's going to be hearts and there's going to be a lot of fun. So keep on watching. Okay, so if you remember, I got the limited edition Cupid box from the Fat Quarter shop, and this is the 2021 box. And it came with a pattern that I wasn't really a big fan of. So I am going to be using the fabric from that box, and I am going to be using the panel, one section of it, and I'm going to add in a little bit of fabric that I had in my stash, some pinks and reds, of course, and some white for background. So I'm going to start ironing this fabric and getting it all ready for cutting. So if you would like to see what I'm going to do with this fabric, keep on watching. Okay, so to start, we're going to cut out our panel pieces. We want this center panel, it's going to be the center of our quilt, the typewriter. We want it to be cut at about 12.5 inches. We're not going to use the quilt labels on the front of the quilt. I might use one to label the quilt, but those we're not going to be using right now. But we are going to use these for little panels as well. So we want to cut the envelope and the phone out at about 6.5 inches and squares, and then I think these were at about 2.5 inch squares. If it is something different, I will note on the video here. So we're going to cut out those, and then we're going to cut all 7 of our fat 8s. We're going to cut them into 2.5 inch strips. So all 7 of those, and then I'm adding in 4 fat quarters from my fabric stash, and I'm going to cut all those down to 2.5 inches too, 2.5 inch strips. You may not need that many. I just want a variety of colors to be able to choose from how I'm going to be putting the blocks together. So just keep that in mind as you watch. And then I have about 1/2 yard of background white fabric that I'm going to use for sashing and for background on the hearts we're going to be making. All right, so let's keep on moving through this pattern, and please let me know in the comments if you have any questions. If you don't have this panel, just keep note of the measurements and you may be able to find a panel that you would like to use, or you can just use some very beautiful fabric that you like and cut it down to these sizes and work it in. Okay, let's keep working. Okay, so we also have some background fabric we need to cut. And we have some 2.5 inch squares here. Let me get, we need to cut 16 of these, so 16 2.5 inch squares. We need 8 6.25 inch squares. We need some, these are 2.5 inch wide by 12.5 inch long, and there are 12 of these, and these are going to be for your sashing. And then we also have 6 2.5 inch strips by width of fabric, and these are for the sashing and the border as well. So those are our background cuts, and we also have cut down all of our pattern strips already, right? So now we're going to cut some of these down to 2.5 inch strips. You need to cut 24 of these. And what I did was made sure that they all weren't the same ones. I wanted a nice variety because these are going to be for our hearts. So what we're going to do with these after we get them cut is we're going to start sewing 3 strips together. So we should end up with 8 rectangles of 3 strips sewn together. And once we do that, we'll move on to creating the hearts with those. Now we still have these that we're going to be working on. So don't get rid of any of the strips that are left over from cutting down those 2.5-inch squares, because our 12.5-inch strips, because you will have some leftovers that you can use, and we're going to be building onto these to get these up to 12.5-inch squares as well. Okay, so we have our strips sewed together in groups of 3, and remember that is 24 2.5-inch by 12.5-inch strips. So we have these sewn together in groups of 3, and now we're ready to start building our hearts. So I marked all of my 2.5-inch squares corner to corner, and my 6.25-inch squares corner to corner, and I have pinned them on to my panels in the corners for the 2.5-inch at the bottom of the strip rectangles. And you see how I have them in such a way as they're making a point down at the bottom, and I'm going to be cutting off the corners on the top. So that is how we're building them. So what we're going to do is go to the sewing machine, and we're going to be sewing along the marked line right down the center on all of these panels. Okay, so this will get our hearts made, and then we'll be able to start building our little panel pieces here. This quilt comes together really quickly as long as you have everything nice and organized and ready to go. Okay, so we're moving right along. After we sewed those background pieces onto the corners, here's what we got. And all we need to do now is just bring these together and sew a 1/4-inch seam along the edge, and then we will have our hearts. Aren't they cute? Okay, so if you did sew a double seam across here like I showed and cut down the middle, you would have these half square triangles made up of our 2.5-inch strips. And what I'm thinking is we could bring them together, because we'll have 8, and you know, there's a bunch of different ways you could design them, but if you brought 4 together, pulling them up really well, you could make some cute little pot holders, trivets, whatever you want to call them, and have a little side project that you already had done while making this. So I'm going to sew the hearts together, and what we are going to do is work on these as well. And we're going to be kind of reminiscent of courthouse steps. We're going to be sewing a strip onto the top and bottom, pressing them open, and then matching along the sides, and keep building it up like that until we get to 12.5 inches, 12.5 inches. And then we're going to do the same on these. So we're going to sew a strip to the top and bottom and press them open, square it up, and then to the sides, and keep building it like that. So it's going to be really simple. And we're just going to get it up to the 12.5 inches, which is going to be the size of our blocks. You should have a bunch of 2.5-inch strips left to build this quilt. And what we're going to do is assemble it after we do that. And it's going to be really easy, because it's going to be kind of a smaller wall hanging quilt, or something that you would lay over your couch or a chair, just to add some brightness to a room, especially around this time of year getting into spring. So let's keep on working on this. Okay, so I wanted to give a little peek at how the quilt is coming together so far. So if you see, I have hearts here, and I've been surrounding the letter with 2.5-inch strips and the little love you scribbles, so the one that's kind of like this size. So something I wanted to point out is if you wanted to, you could just make 4 more hearts to go on the corners if you would like. That would be really cute as well. Or if you got the Cupid box and didn't give away some of your panels, I gave away 3. If you didn't, you could just do letters or a combination of the phone and the letters on the corners. There's a lot of ways you could change this up. If you wanted to, you could just make it bigger and add more blocks. I am going to show piecing these 2 together, but it's really very simple. You just add on strips to the sides. On this one, there's 2 strips that go on each side, and on this one, 3 strips that are going to need to go on each side. If you can see, I had to trim mine down to the 12.5 inches. You could make your strips a little bit smaller so your outer strips don't have to be trimmed as much. I don't mind how it looks, but if you wanted it to be more symmetrical, then just adjust your strip length or strip width. So another thing to note is that you may have to piece some of your strips together to get it to fit. I think I did on this block. So I pieced those together to get it the length. You don't really notice after everything's all together, but if you don't want to have to piece them together, you may need to cut more strips than what I gave. So you may need another fat quarter or so. All right, so we're gonna keep on working through the quilt. After we get all these together, we're just gonna start piecing it. I did have you cut enough strips so that you could either do these strips, the 12.5 inch on the end, and just bring these strips out farther, or what I'm probably going to do is trim here and do a long strip along the ends. I gave you enough cuts that you could decide either way, but just a note on that. Okay, so let's keep on working through the quilt. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I trim these squares down to 12.5 inches. So I just fold it in half once and then fold it in half again. And I'm going to mark the middle. This is a erasable friction pen, and it erases with heat. So whatever pen you prefer to use to mark your fabric that will disappear, you can use that. So I just marked the middle spot, and then I'm going to open it up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to align my ruler at 6 1/4 inches this way, and also this way. So I have the 6 1/4 inches in the middle, and then I'm just going to tilt my ruler whichever way I need to get my lines lined up straight in all the other directions. So 6 1/4 in both directions, up this way from one and up this way from one. And there's a dot there that I line up the middle on. And then I just cut in all directions. If you have a rotating mat that will fit this size block, that would honestly be easiest. I don't have one that's big enough to rotate, so I just manage the best I can, cutting in all directions. So it's just as easy as that, as long as your thread's cut all the way through. So I didn't cut that side. It's just as easy as that, I say, and then it doesn't all cut apart. Okay, so that is how I trim that up. And like I said, you could make these strips less wide so that they're kind of all the same size, but it doesn't bother me. So do what you like. So I'm going to do this other one again so you can see. You should close your rotary cutter if you're not using it. Just for safety, I sometimes forget. So fold in half, and mark the middle with whatever you have that can mark it. And then we're gonna line up our square cutter. So mine is 12.5 inches, so that is obviously really helpful here. I guess I didn't think about that, you know. Maybe you won't have one. So I would probably mark the center and then go 6 1/4 inches each way to do that. But let me see if I'm lined up. I need to tilt this side just a little. Okay, I think we're good. So that's probably how I would do it if you don't have a square ruler that's exactly the right size, is just cut 6 1/4 in each direction, or you know, use a ruler and draw it out on your square and get it even and cut that way. I'm sure in the comments there's people who would probably have better suggestions for you. If you do have a better suggestion for how to cut it, if you don't have a 12.5 inch ruler, let us know. So there is that one. And now all the blocks for the quilt are finished and we can start piecing it together. So here is our quilt layout, and I'm going to start sewing these together in rows, and I'm leaving behind 4 2.5 inch strips that are the length with the width of the fabric to go around the whole outside as a border. And you see I have 2 that are separating the rows right now. Those I'm going to sew on after I sew all the rows together and make this a square and then sew that border on. So here is the finished quilt top. I hope that you guys enjoy the design and enjoy making this quilt. It was a lot of fun and it is very versatile. You could do all hearts, you could do more of the envelopes and phones. There's just a lot of things that you could do, just add more blocks to make it bigger. I am going to quilt it soon and I will let you guys see what I decide to do there. But otherwise, if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. I know I went through it kind of quickly, but I think that the design is pretty straightforward once you get the hang of it. So again, let me know if you have any questions. One thing I don't know if I pointed out, but you really need to make sure before you start piecing all of your blocks together with the stashing, just make sure that they all are 12.5 inch blocks or squares. Okay? All right, you guys, thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye.